Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Breaking the Silence where you can unleash your inner voice. So, Breaking the Silence has had so many authors to grace the stage, and I've purchased every single book from my guests. I will be reading all the books that my guests have written and given reviews on them. Quarterly, I will recognize an author. So the first book on the list is Duck Finds a Forever Home by Alyssa Page Glenn. She is a children's book author and a nonprofit founder of Foster Adoption Mission, which caters to helping children in need. So today's guest is Dr. Stephen Graves. He is an author of At War with Politics, assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Center of African Studies at Oklahoma State University, founder of nonprofit Troublesome. He has received several awards, including Black Excellence 365 Award and an MU Faculty Teaching Award in Diversity. He has provided Thanksgiving meals to over 200 local families. He desires to create a space for people who are having a hard time, such as creating shelters and learning centers. He specializes in Black politics, political theory, and American government. His favorite quote is, "Who taught you to hate yourself?" So, after the countdown, please welcome this amazing example of excellence to the stage. Hello, how you doing today?
Oh, good. The weather here in the Midwest is just having its way with us right now. So we're getting there though, at least.
Oh wow, I'm sorry that you're going through that today in the early hours anyway. What time is it there?
Seriously. 11:07.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on Breaking the Silence. I do appreciate you highly.
No, I appreciate it very much. Thank you for having me in the first place. I always enjoy these talking and have some good, conversations with people. I really do enjoy it.
Awesome. Tell me, why did you choose to specialize in Black American voting and Black liberation?
Um, well, my parents, first of all, were very, Afrocentric minded, Black minded. So that definitely helped. Originally I thought I was going to go to law school when I was an undergrad, but when I got there were just too many people who were doing it, and so I didn't even make it through the first day. I just figured if this is what everybody was doing, then I wanted to do something else. And so then I got into political science. I figured it was kind of the next best thing. I had a great professor and mentor at the time, and I was, again, 18 years old, 17 years old, and just showed me a different way about trying to communicate and trying to pass on knowledge and try to affect and influence people, decision making and things like that. And so obviously, my own experiences, of course, being Black, being poor, single parent household, growing up in predominantly white places and spaces, institutions and high schools and whatnot. I always had, and of course, and again, and my parents' strong kind of influence about identity and Blackness, that definitely put me in a space to where I kind of centered, the Black experience, in my own, adversities and whatnot, growing in predominantly white spaces, and trying to figure out how to turn that into a career and something that I could, make change. I always felt like I had, propensity to make changes. I was always somewhat, active and, intellectually minded. and kind of a provocateur of change. And so, in the classroom, being a professor outside of, again, my early inclinations about law school was going to be the best way about going about it. So I learned a little bit about government. I took some government jobs to kind of figure out how things work and whatnot. And again, I ended up just getting back to now in the classroom, with students, with young minds, the turnover every 6 months was going to be my best bet. And of course, and again, I'm into Black people. I'm into studying our own adversities, and most importantly, freedom and liberation, and what it means for Black people to to experience and have, justice and liberation. It just seemed like really kind of a no-brainer to me after I dealt with my own, individual identity and my own, family background, and dealing with, what I was experiencing as a Black person, in especially a young Black male in particular, in the 90s, early 2000s, and then going to college and whatnot. I just wanted to center that experience. I had some great, mentors and some great kind of inspirational figures that kind of helped paint the picture for me of what that looked like. And so once I knew that I could just be myself and just do, and just be who I authentically was into a path going forward, Black liberation and Black politics was an easy fit.
Wow, we need more individuals like you in the world. I do believe that our culture needs to be taught in schools again. There's a lot of people that, our generation now don't know our history like they should.
Right. And the thing about it is that's important is that I always kind of hearken to and think about when I think about my authors and whatnot and Black liberation ideology and theory and whatnot, and some of my inspirational figures like Malcolm X and others. You read the quote that was my favorite. That was from Malcolm. Is I'm not sure if the strategy is to rely and depend on whites to teach Black people about Black history and African education. I mean, I don't think that is the strategy. Look where it has gotten us, so far. I don't trust necessarily, white teachers and or white institutions to accurately and honestly depict Black history, especially African history. Again, look what it's done for us so far. It has taught millions and generations upon generations that Black people haven't contributed to society, that we're just lucky to be here. We should be grateful for being here. Africans, we were being rescued from a backward civilization, all those things. That is what, white education and the, white dominant, political institutions have taught Black people about ourselves and whatnot. Thus, then, when you think about it now, when I think about public education and things like that, again, I'm still not sure that it is the safest and best place for Black students, and Black people of all ages, really to learn about themselves. I think that it is in the best hands of our culture and of our elders and ancestors and of our intellectuals. Because the precedent about how white people have taught Black people about themselves is not good.
Well, my mom always say anything that you learn starts where? In the home.
Yep.
So it starts home.
Absolutely. And that
so,
was how traditionally Black people learned about themselves. That is traditionally how it was done. That was, traditionally when, again, we couldn't necessarily, infiltrate into white schools, pre-segregation, pre-Brown v. Board, when we had predominantly of Black teachers and Black, and Black schools, and we were self-teaching, self-taught for the most part. That was traditionally how it's been done. Now, post Brown v. Board, of course, and they integrated the school system. They start busing Black kids all over the place, and they start, nationalizing the school system in that way. Then we lost a lot of that, and unfortunately, what came with that too is we started to believe in our culture and our society that we were getting a better education, and that there were better opportunities, and that we were going to be better prepared by going into these predominantly white schools, thanks to busing and thanks to desegregation. And that just hasn't proven to be the case if you look at how we're doing educationally still 50 years, 60 years, 70 years later.
You're right. So why do you think voting in our culture is so important? We're always talking about you got to get to these polls and you have to vote. Why do you think it's important for us as a culture?
I think that voting for us as a culture is only important when that vote actually matters, and we are in places and spaces where that vote actually has power. Unfortunately, we have been duped into believing that it is some civic duty for us to show up to polls, even when whoever the candidates are, whatever the issues are, do not benefit us. I think what we're seeing with this, current political state of a two-party system is that we're being played by one party, and we're being ignored by the other party. And they keep telling us every single year that this is the biggest election of our lifetime. Well, every election is the biggest election for Black people, it appears, because our wants and our needs and our political, priorities seem to always be at the bottom, and we always seem to keep kind of fighting for those. And so the idea that Black people are roasted are going to flip these elections and have this significant amount of power roasted to unleash is only really the case when we're in Black places and spaces where we have a voting majority for which those things actually count. I mean, just looking at current presidential elections right now, they're only really highlighted 6 or 7 states, those swing states. Most of the people are also outside of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Ohio, places like that. Those seem to be the main states. The other places have pretty much been decided for the most part. So there's not really a lot of leeway there. Now, in local elections, it's a different story. Local elections is a different story. But again, even in those places and spaces, it's imperative that Black people, have, voting power to go along with it. When we're not in places and spaces and communities for which our numbers, and this is why we have to cry democracy in some instances, when we don't have the numbers to make this sway. Now we're dependent on whites, liberal whites, white women, roasted to kind of to help us get things that we want to be done. And historically, that has shown us not to be very successful either. If you again think of 2016 and the white women that handed that election to Trump, so we don't really have natural allies on there that we can depend on every single election. Thus, then the move really is for Black people. So the move really is for Black people to create those places and spaces for when those votes can be utilized. I do not think that it is imperative that Black people, continue to pimp ourselves out to political parties every election. If you really want to make the biggest change in your community, the biggest change in your life, it really starts at home. It starts in your local community, going to PTAs, again, educating your children, participating in local clubs and social capital atmospheres for which you can be a part of the community. But again, depending on some other party, depending on whites, depending on, someone outside the Black community to kind of uplift and empower us voting wise, again, just seems like an exercise in futility.
All right. I agree completely. You have a question from someone live. What are Dr. Gray's thoughts on the ban on DEI and the removal of dictionaries and Wikipedias in schools?
That's an excellent question. The banning on DEI is the new white fear strategy that they are using. It's a new Southern strategy. Back in the days in the early Reagan Bush elections and whatnot, that used to cry criminals and revolving door and welfare queens, and that was the kind of strategy call that they would use about Black people and Black progress and Black people find them places and spaces. But the ban on DEI really is white fear coming to fruition. What they are witnessing, of course, this has to do a lot with immigration and the broadening of America. Their fear that this country is going to be predominantly Black and brown, in the next coming of years. That timeline of 2045 have moved up significantly. Whites, for the first time, are realizing that their power, and their containment is slipping. They're no longer the first in line for everything. They no longer have, first access to all the jobs and important careers in this and professions in this country. The ban on DEI is white folks grasping for their last growth of this control of power. But the thing about it is that's interesting, though, is that, if you think of Black and brown communities, we're not necessarily all aligned necessarily either. And white still will kind of, maintain that, as the single highest ethnic group. But the idea, of course, is that they're realizing, that this country is getting browner and Blacker this every single year. And it is not the country that they recognize. Hence, you kind of see this Make America Great Again. They want to go back. White America wants to go back to a time when they had first priority, first choice. The laws were kind of tailored to their wants and needs. The police were kind of tailored to their wants and needs, which is why you see them always calling the police on Black folks, because they expect, right? They expect to get the benefit of the doubt. They expect the police to act in their best interest. But again, what we are seeing increasingly, even with some of this Trump trials and some of these other things, is all of a sudden the FBI and the police, not only do they have Black people in it, but they've got, Black attorney generals and Black sheriffs, and all of a sudden whites are coming under the same laws that they have been trying to impart on Black people for all these years. And they believe that to be unfair. They believe that this country was built for them, made for them, that the founding fathers built this country for their best interest. And all of a sudden, this country is not necessarily, acting in their best interest. For when Black people were beneath them, second class, when Native Americans knew their place, when Hispanics knew their place, and when Asian Americans knew their place as well. We got Chinese Immigration Act, Japanese internment camps, so they've always had this position of being the white dominant culture and being in charge. And what we're realizing is, especially since the 2008, Obama's election really is a pinnacle of whiteness and white fear. They were, up
Mhm.
until then, we
That's
get
true.
it. A couple black judges, Clarence Thomas in there. You can be a black, representative in Congress. Sure, you can be a principal, whatnot. We'll give you those. But the office of the president has always been deemed as the highest office also in this country and on this planet, especially for whites. That is the pinnacle symbol of power, also is of the first world and kind of the white American hegemony. So when you get a black person, what they never expected, no black person, or else it is, ever thought we see a black president. And for whites, that was the tipping point for which they fully recognized that if a black person can win this seat, black people can be involved in all kinds of things and everything. Our reigns on power have completely slipped to where we've seen a black person in the highest office in the land. This is not the country we thought it would be, and the ban on DEI and things like that is symbolic of that. The last thing I will say about DEI and about the schools and whatnot is white people are afraid of their grandkids also learning about how terrible human beings that they were. That's really what this comes down to. When you think about, in the schools and whatnot, right? If you flip through these old photos and you flip through Black Wilson's history, eventually the thing that's going to happen is people, these kids are going to ask questions, especially in 2024, in this day and age, with the idea of increased diversity in roles, movies and whatnot. So you get these kids in K through 12, and they're learning about oppression, and they're learning about slavery, they're learning about racism and segregation, right? And the Tulsa Race Massacre. And they come home, most of this, right? Or they talk to their parents when they get home. They talk to their grandparents on the holidays, and they say, "Man, mom, dad, grandpa, why did you guys hate black people? Why didn't you guys want to sit next to black people in the bar or in the theater or on the bus? What was going on there?" And they do, and those parents and those grandparents and white people do not want to face those questions in this day and age. They just prefer to say, wipe it off the thing. Let's look forward. Why do you keep going back to the past? Let's not have a victim mentality and all those other kind of things, because they generally do not want to, face the realization when it comes to this modern day and age and new kids, this new generation asking, what in the hell was wrong with you people back in the days? Grandpa, why is this a video of you kicking this black man who's just walking down the street? Why are they hosing and biting these Negroes with dogs and things like that? What were you guys thinking and doing? They don't want to actually answer those questions and deal with that in this day and age, because it's a great failure for them, and they don't have any responses to that, especially in light of the current situation that we're getting to. The last thing I'll say real quick about DEI and things like that too is when it talks about in the classroom of Black history is white people know they don't really have a history, and if you look back to their history, it is not a very good one. If you think about all the world wars, if you think about the conquistadors, if you think about the Crusades, if you think about Iliad and all these great battles, it is a individualistic, rampant, violent culture, European culture going all the way back until Negroes discovered them, is a very brutal, selfish, violent world. It is history, which is why they're always pillaging and taking from others. Because that is their history, and that's where they borrowed from. And I think that is another thing that they do not want to confront and face. That if you look back upon the time of European history, it is not a peaceful one. There's not a lot of democracy and civilization and great culture going on around there. It is a lot of pillaging. Look to their heroes. Look to the Vikings, and look to the people that they are always talking about. It is a history of violence, or else it is, and pillaging. And I think that white people are afraid of confronting that, as well as they talk about other people's histories and cultures and barbarism. They have one also that they do not want to confront.
That's true. I recently had a debate with my son on my debates nights about Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. What are your thoughts about those two when it comes down to the civil rights era?
I'd have this discussion with my students all the time. It seems like Rose this every semester. And the thing about the Martin Malcolm thing is two things. One, by the end of it, they find themselves on a very similar page. And that's one thing about just growing older and just knowledge and evolving times. But I would also say about Malcolm and Martin that is important is that it is very symbolic of a lot of the kind of intra-racial thing that Black people deal with internally, even to this day, and that deals with things like class. If you think about the civil rights movement and you think about Martin and Malcolm, they also have two separate camps. You have got a Brown, post Brown v. Board kind of camp, middle class Blacks Think of Rosa Parks, right? Remember that, there was Claudette
Mhm.
Colvin before Rosa Parks, the teenage Black girl who refused to do so, but she didn't fit the mold that the NAACP wanted at the
Right.
time to be the face of the civil rights movement, right? They're talking about middle class, working class, Black people, Rosa is, that to be the face of these things, Black people who feel, have something to lose and have these jobs, and damn it, they don't want to lose them. We realized what segregation was about, was the back. And that was, the capital that was invested in the civil rights movement from these churches. These are middle class Blacks donating to the church that then donated to, Martin in the civil rights movement. So that is one camp. On the other side, of course, then you've got poor Blacks, the ghetto Blacks, relatives, right? Upper city, non-Southern, big city Blacks, relatives, poor Blacks, right? The Black majority, and that is Malcolm's camp. Okay, they don't give a damn about your middle class interests and your bourgeoisie taste and class